Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started. Good morning everyone and welcome to today's CTPM webinar. Today's topic is sustaining improvements and the session will run for half an hour. My name is Samantha Rowan and I'm the Marketing and Operations Manager here at CTPM and I'll be your chairperson today. Our presenter today is Ross Kennedy. Ross Kennedy is the President of CTPM Australasia and heads up a team of CI specialists based in Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia and Thailand. After 20 years of operations experience, followed by 5 years of international consulting experience, he established CTPM with several colleagues in 1996. Ross has been actively involved with Lean since 1985 and the application of TPM since 1990. He has conducted over 200 public workshops and presented over 50 papers on TPM and Lean. He is recognised as Australasia's leading authority on TPM and TPM cubed. Now before we get started, we'll just cover a quick lot of useful hints for people who haven't used GoToWebinar before. So as you can see, you have a control panel with a variety of functions in front of you. This button here is View the Window mode, allows you to change your view. We have raised the hand button, but due to the amount of people joining us today, we'll not be using this function. So if you'd like to ask any questions, please type them in the control box provided. We'll attempt to answer all questions at the end of the session. However, if we run out of time, we'll be sending out a questions and answers sheet via email, so no one's questions go unanswered. But please feel free to write questions throughout the whole session and we'll approach them at the end. If you do not want to write any questions, you can hide the control panel by simply pressing the button here. This will leave you with a little bar instead of a big control panel. To leave the webinar, simply go to File and press Exit Leave Webinar. Throughout the webinar, we'll be also having some interactive polls, so when a poll appears on your screen, simply select one of the answers and press Submit. Other than that, I hope you enjoy today's webinar and I'll pass you on to Ross.
Welcome everyone. My name is Ross Kennedy and welcome to our webinar. The aim of the webinar today is to discuss sustaining improvements, and we'll try to cover three key areas. One is the use of tools versus and ongoing versus event improvement. But before we start on that, I'd just like to reflect back last month. My colleague Paul Futudo ran a webinar and he talked about reactive improvement and used the slide to explain how reactive improvement was made up of three key components, and that is having a effective daily review meeting, secondly having clear policies on when to initiate reactive improvement, and thirdly having an effective frontline problem-solving process. And that webinar is on can be accessed through our web page. Today I want to focus on the proactive part of improvement and how do we sustain the proactive part of improvement, which is about going above our current performance to a level of world-class performance. So before we get started, I'd just like to initiate a quick poll on whether your sites are focusing on proactive or reactive improvement. Right, the results came back saying that 20% of us are focusing on proactive improvement, 20% are focused on reactive improvement, and 60% are focusing on both. I guess the most successful sites we find do a balance between the both. And hopefully today, after talking a little bit more about proactive improvement, we'll get everyone focusing on both. All right. Now, my screen has. Oh no, here we go. Moving forward. Jeffrey Leica is quite a famous author. He wrote a book originally in 2004 called The Toyota Way, which became a bestseller business book around the world. Since then, he's gone on with especially with other colleagues, writing a number of books. The one I'd like to refer to today is the book he published back in 2011 or last year on continuous improvement. And it's, again, a very good read. And he talks about improvement and how to get sustainability improvement, and he gives a lot of case studies in there, which are interesting because most of them result in the improvement not sustaining. And then he goes on and he introduces a couple of interesting terms. One is a term of mechanistic versus organic approaches to improvement, which another way of saying tools versus people-focused improvement. He refers and says that mechanistic is a linear view of the workplace. It's about treating the workplace like a machine that requires tools to fix it. And then he goes on and talks about organic is a systemic view of the workplace. So it's treating the workplace like a living organism that requires nurturing. And in his book, his conclusion is that mechanistic approaches do not sustain. So I guess if we listen to Professor Leica, we need to understand more about organic and systemic view of the workplace. And the best or example I could find that we use in our workshop, our two-day public workshop, is where we start describing what TPM is all about. And this next slide is taken from our two-day workshop, where it describes that TPM is about addressing equipment problems at the source. So it's about going out there and finding the little problems like a damaged grease line rather than a failed bearing. And hence the thinking is if you fix up a damaged grease line, it costs you very little and your downtime is very little. And that's why TPM effectively installed, implemented in sites will cut the maintenance spend by 50%, as well as increase output probably by another 30 to 50%. But it's interesting, in the learning about TPM, what Toyota realized was to find those little problems you need to engage the operators and get the operators out there, operators to find them, because there wasn't enough maintenance people to find all the little problems, which makes good sense. And but they had to train the operators to know what to look for. So you could go down the path of let's go and implement a training program for operators. And you do that as a linear approach, and that's fine. The operators learn about defects. But if we don't change the equipment so it's easy for them to find the problems, they spend too much time trying to find the defects. They become unproductive because they're not actually operating the plant, and the whole purpose of the exercise falls apart. So we go out and change all the equipment and make it really easy for the operators to go and find problems. But then the operators find a defect and they notify maintenance, and maintenance insists on it being put through their work order system, and it goes into a work order system, and then it finally gets prioritized and it finally gets issued as a work order. And by then the operators are going, whoa, why are we wasting our time finding things? The maintenance people never come and fix them. So for TPM to work, we realized that you had to take a systemic view. You had to do activities in different areas and for you to get the result you're after. So that was one of the I guess, key points from Leica. The other point he raised was he raised the language of organic thinking as like thermodynamics and entropy. Now, thermodynamics is the science of heat transfer. It was developed during the Industrial Revolution when the advent of steam engines, the Watt steam engine here. The whole thing was that people thought initially when they built steam engines, if you put more steam in, you would get more energy or output. What they soon came to realize, and through the study of thermodynamics, was that there's this thing called entropy, which can be viewed as the amount of energy in a physical system that's not available to do work. In other words, part of the steam going in the engine actually heats up the steam and dissipates outside the casing of the engine. Along came this law of thermodynamics, which was simply entropy or disorder will naturally increase over time. The example that Leica used, and we find quite useful as well, is this concept of boiling a kettle. When we stop applying, we put the kettle on the stove, we get energy, we get heat in the water, we get steam coming out quite orderly. But when we take the kettle off the stove, it will naturally cool down, or entropy increases. So the energy level of the water decreases naturally if we do nothing at all. Now, if we take that second law of thermodynamics, or law of nature, and I guess law of nature is a very useful. The thermodynamics and the second law of thermodynamics is very simple. I guess another way to describe comparing it's like the law of gravity. You get an object, you drop it, it falls to the ground. Second law of thermodynamics, you get a hot object, you put it on your bench, a cup of coffee, it will naturally decay, it will naturally cool down. So think about work groups and the impact of this law of nature on work groups. A mechanistic approach to operations excellence would be to go out and have some sort of event. Grab a tool of lean, whether it be value stream mapping, whether it be setup reduction, or whatever. You go out and you apply it in the workplace, you get some results and you're very impressed. Then you go away and that improvement team goes off to another area, and what happens is you get natural decay. It will act, and I don't know if anyone's experienced that, where you have had a situation where you've gone and done some great improvement and then you stop the activity and it naturally goes back and people start forgetting to put things back, forgets to follow the rules. What we've learned is organic approach is doing weekly, regular improvement activities that don't stop. So it's weekly improvement activities focusing on developing people, because the people are the ones who are going to sustain it. That's the organism in the business, the people. So by doing that results in ongoing improvement and sustained results. So in conclusion on that point, our learning has been to sustain operations excellence. We need to ultimately have everyone engaged at least 10% of their normal work time in ongoing improvement activities. Now, the reason we've come up with 10% is, again, it's based on a lot of our benchmarking throughout the world and best practices, and we see 10% as probably the recognised benchmark for getting people involved in proactive improvement. Now, we've certainly come across sites that do more than that, but the sites that get up to excellence certainly have got 10% going. And we see it should be broken between cross-functional teams where people are allowed to go and work with other people outside their normal work group and to learn ways of different ways of thinking, etc., and build relationships up. And the area-based teams is your work group, and we find work groups of about 4 to 8 people with a dedicated team leader are the most effective work groups. And we're trying to teach people problem solving. We're trying to get them to do prevention at source, and that is find the little problems at the earliest possible time, and creating a visual workplace so they can do that very rapidly. Now, just as a poll, we're interested to find out how much time do your people, your operators, let's use operators as an example, spend on proactive improvement activities. So we hand over to the poll, please. Right, the results are about 20% of us are 0 to 1 and about 80% are 2 to 4. What we find in when we run our public workshops, majority of people tend to fall in about the 1% mark. So 2 to 4 is getting better, and again, as I said, the sites that are getting up there to the world class, if not at world class, are in the 8 to 10. So I guess that gives us recognition there's some opportunities out there for us. Now, moving on, operations excellence through TPM Lean is about developing new skills and abilities within our workforce, especially at the front line, because the whole concept of taking out waste and finding losses is about getting our frontline people finding the problems at the earliest possible time. They're the people doing the work. So we talk about the model for best practice from a production perspective is having a production team leader and their team members, again roughly 4 to 8, focusing on finding the safety and environment issues at the earliest possible time, finding quality problems at the earliest possible time, finding defects on the equipment through equipment care at the earliest possible time, picking up on any energy wastage at the earliest possible time, achieve the production plan, and doing formal ongoing improvement, which is proactive improvement, and also doing some reactive improvement when things go wrong. So there's a fair bit of development of people that involved in getting the engagement of people and being able to solve problems. So the question we have is, how do we go about developing our people? And our learning has been that we need a well-proven means to develop these new skills and ability. And we put a question to ourselves at CTPM: what activity do we know of that has been around for centuries that requires a person to develop new skills and abilities? And probably the most obvious answer to that came in playing a musical instrument. I don't know if anyone out there who's plays a musical instrument or knows of a family member who's learned to play a musical instrument, but if you reflect back on that and say, what does a person sound like when they first pick up a musical instrument, I guess the answer is they might be having a lot of fun, but it sounds pretty horrible. So we then look at how is the best way do we teach people to play musical instruments. And obviously over the years we've probably tried many methods, but what we've found, history's taught us that the best method to learn to play a musical instrument or develop a new skill set is to have a structured half-hour lesson each week from a competent teacher with regular practice and encouragement, recognizing it may take several years to become competent and many years to become a master. So with that learning, what we've found is this ongoing improvement is about having a half-hour lesson each week, and this addresses this what we call the decay, the natural decay issue of entropy, or the second law of thermodynamics. By doing a half-hour lesson every week, we keep the fires burning, and you sustain your improvements rather than just having the big event. So we see the side of the management team as absolutely critical in this whole journey of sustainability. We see the role of the site management team has 2 key roles. One is to achieve the production plan and satisfy the customer, and that would involve probably some reactive improvement as well, and then doing the proactive improvement, which is improve the way they achieve the production plan and satisfy the customer. And again, we see proactive improvement is most effective and sustaining if it involves cross-functional teams and area-based teams, and ultimately having everyone spending 5% of their time doing both. Now, for this to happen, your site management team needs to monitor the proactive improvement. And we find it's best when you first start down the journey to distinguish the two and to have your management team do their normal management meetings about achieving the production plan and satisfying the customers, and having a separate meeting for proactive improvement so that they can focus on proactive improvement. And we're not talking about big long-winded meetings, we're talking about regular short meetings, and ideally a half-hour meeting a week or a 1-hour meeting a week. But just as a quick poll at your site, do you have a site management team that has a dedicated proactive improvement meeting to see how proactive improvement is going at the site, and if so, what frequency? Right. So our poll tells us about half our attendees rarely have a proactive improvement site management team meeting, and 50% do it fortnightly. Interesting story on the fortnightly. We were working with a client in New Zealand, CTPM Foods, and when they first started down their journey, they had weekly leadership team meetings for their improvement. Then after about three cycles, they decided that, hey, there's a fair bit of effort here, so they moved it to fortnightly. And I remember talking to the general manager towards the end of the cycle, and his feedback to me was, yes, that was a learning, Ross. We'll go back to weekly because it just lost the focus when we only met fortnightly. But anyway, that's just been some of the learnings of some of the sites. Now, the role of the site leadership team in the TPM Lean journey, just moving on, we see there's three key roles we talk about in our workshops. One is to actually establish a site leadership team for proactive improvement, along with a clearly defined and resource support structure. We talk about a continuous improvement coordinator or TPM coordinator or lean coordinator, whatever name you wish to give them, but someone who's out there to facilitate the teams and project manage all the activities. But most importantly, not take responsibility for the success of the activities. That should be the champions, which are the leadership team members. But the second thing is to plan and monitor progress through quarterly or at least 4 monthly proactive improvement strategy planning sessions and weekly review meetings. And again, we focus on the concept of a weekly review meeting, but we also put the journey in hunks of 3 to 4 months. The other thing we get site leadership teams to do, and we talk about in our workshops, is about establishing the visions, the improvement vision, the operator excellence vision, and the operations vision, the philosophies for decision making, and getting goal alignment for the site. But today we're just focusing on the plan and monitoring progress. So if we move on, what we have found that most successful sites have broken their proactive improvement journey into 3 to 4 month improvement cycles, supported by a 3 to 5 year master plan. In other words, the big picture, where do we want to take this, are supported by the 3 to 4 monthly cycles where we sit back, reflect on what we're doing. A question we often get asked is why 3 to 4 month improvement cycles? This comes from the research which has been identified that human physiology is such that we can focus on events for up to about 12 weeks. So if you go on the web and look under physiology or look under a lot of things, and you'll be amazed at how many 12-week programs exist for this very reason. We've found that people can stay focused for about 12 weeks. And then it's a great opportunity to celebrate success, the team being successful, then moving on and setting up again and going forward. And that's why most companies we work with try to have at least 3 cycles a year. Some endeavour to have 4 or 3.5, and etc. Now, we wrote a paper, or we published a paper, it's on our webpage, it's a free paper called The 10-Year Review of the Operations Capability of Australian Industry. And you can find it if you go to a web page and go and look under the heading of navigation and then go to TPM Cube methodology, you'll see a section called TPM and Lean Papers, and you're welcome to download the paper. What's it all about? Well, it's about looking at, when we run our public workshops, we ask everyone who attends to complete what we call an Operations Capability Innocence to Excellence rating sheet. And we ask people to rate how good's their quality, how good's their response performance, and how good do they engage their people. We've been doing this for 10 years. What we've found over the 10 years is that the average score in the Australian industry, and you'll see in the paper all the scores and all the companies that have attended, has come out around the 50% mark, and it hasn't improved. And I guess our conclusion from all that is that there's 3 ways you can improve your operations capability. You can do it through technology and automation, you can do it through project and events, or you can do it through ongoing improvement focused on developing all people to enhance their practices and behaviours. And what we find is most Australian companies tend to focus on the first 2, technology and automation and project and events, and wonder why their improvements don't sustain. And then you find why we have this average score for 10 years that hasn't gone anywhere. In the paper we have a little case study which is based on a food processing plant down in Tasmania, They put in new equipment, installed new equipment, and put some projects and event improvements were initiated to address the many initial problems. However, expected performance improvements started to plateau after several years. And it's only when they started to get the area-based teams going with ongoing weekly improvement with support activities that they started to strive for this operational excellence, that they started to get some significant gains again. And within a few years, or within 3 years, they had over a 50% closing of their gap. So their OEE gap closed, their yield loss gap closed, etc., saving millions of dollars. So with that, I'd just like to ask one last quick survey regarding your focus on proactive improvement activities. We can hand over to the poll, please. Right, and the results come in that we've got 60% of ad hoc events or projects, no regular events or projects in the same area, and 40% regular events or projects but in different areas and moving around, and 0 on ongoing activities. And I guess that's what we find in a lot of sites, and that's why, again, if you get hold of the paper, you'll see why our operations rating hasn't been getting anywhere in Australia. And I think that's the key learning. If we want to sustain our improvements, we've really got to get onto this ongoing improvement activity of a little bit each week and keep people going down the journey. So just to conclude up, our key learnings have been all leadership teams only have about 8 to 12 teams reporting directly to them. What we mean by that, at larger sites, if we're saying a site of 100 people and you've got teams of 4 to 8, you might have something like 15 teams to make up the 100 people to have everyone in a team. If they're both in a cross-functional and area-based team, you can have anything up to 20 to 30 teams going. And that's far too many to feed into one leadership team. So what companies do is, as they expand the journey, they might create area leadership teams or maintenance leadership teams or sub-leadership teams to the site leadership team. We believe all proactive improvement teams report to a leadership team that reviews progress on a weekly basis. All reactive improvement activity reports to a daily review meeting. We spoke about that on the last webinar. And once a person's in a cross-functional team, ensure they continue being in one, so they continue learning and they get better at it, and you need less facilitation. And ensure all the proactive improvement teams successfully achieve their mandate within 12 to 14 weeks, and they you celebrate, and then you create new teams. Right. Thank you for that, and I'd like to hand back over to our moderator. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ross. And so any questions? If you have a question, please type it in now. It's a great opportunity to ask Ross anything about what you've just heard. And if you can't think of any questions right now, then please feel free to contact us or to write us an email or to even give us a phone call. You can talk to Ross himself about sustaining improvements. Now while we're just waiting for if there's any questions, we'll just go on to our next webinar. Will be Wednesday the 12th of December, so probably pretty much a month away, and it's going to be focusing on developing competent and engaged production team leaders. So hopefully you can join us for this one as well. And we also have our contact details here, so as I said, if you can't think of any questions now, please feel free to give us a ring or drop us an email or even visit our website and see that paper that Ross was talking about. We also have other papers up there that are really great to read. Right, so if we don't have any questions, we'll leave it there. So thank you, Ross, for your talk today, and we look forward to hearing from Larry Mazza next month with his webinar. So thank you for all those who's attended, and hopefully we'll see you next time.